Hello and welcome to the Bull SPEC Interviews podcast. I'm Sam Montgomery Blinn of Bull SPEC, and I'm very happy to be here with Lee Hammock, lead game designer for Fallen Earth, a game that provides a unique combination of first-person shooter and role-playing game aspects. It's a multiplayer online game, and we're here in the Cary-based home of Icarus Studios, the parent development company. Lee, thanks very much for letting me sit down with you.
Glad to be here. Glad to have you.
All right. Since we're here at Icarus Studios, let's jump right in and talk about Fallen Earth.
We got Massive Lee's MMO of the Year, Best Crafting of the Year, tied for Best Studio and Best Role-Playing Game Environments in an MMO.
Awesome.
So, Game Reactor TV, which is from Scandinavia, I want to say Sweden, they said it was Best MMO of the Year. So, I mean, we're getting a lot of good critical praise. The problem is we're a niche game, so, we just need to get in front of more people. A lot of people don't know who we are. So we're working on getting the word out and letting people know we've got an awesome game. So, we're kind of doing as we expected. We never planned to launch like Conan and launch with, huge numbers of subscribers and, try and blow everything out. We figured, we're going to go for the slow build and, be more like Eve, build up over time as opposed to trying to hype everything up and blow it out the door. So we're doing about where we want to be.
Cool. I know it represents just thousands and thousands of man-hours of development and art, but it's also kind of your baby. How's it like for it to be out there in the world and kind of out of your control now?
It's interesting at times. It's most of the time it's awesome because generally we get pretty good feedback and people seem to be really engaged. We've made a game for a lot of people who didn't really have an MMO that was made for them before. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, it's really good. I mean, it's really great to see your baby go out there and do well and stuff like that. But there are other times, when I see people who are effectively judging my baby for things that aren't really fair or are just things it was never meant to do. It's the matter of people say, you should have kept it in development for 6 months, or you should have spent more money on or something like that. And I'm like, well, there are things that are beyond our control on all this. It's not like we just have a money tree. We go pick our funding off. We have to figure all this stuff out. So. But so far it's been really, really good. I mean, because like I said, so far it's been very positive. It's been interesting to see it. It's been really interesting to see it take on a life of its own because we have like an in-game radio station that's popped up. We have an in-game comedy newspaper kind of thing, the Wasteland News, which has popped up. So really the best part is seeing the players take parts of it and really make it their own and kind of run with it going forward. And, we've got a great community that's been really big on doing, that sort of stuff. I mean, we have a podcast put on by the Lag War guys called LifeNet, which is fantastic. And, they've got info on there every week. So it's really the most, heartwarming part has been seeing other people really start investing in it.
Cool. You mentioned IGN's ad. I mean, not ad. Sorry, we'll start over again. You mentioned IGN's review, which was very complimentary, but it also said it was unique and challenging, but also not for everyone. How do you think you ended up doing on that balancing of the line between challenging and frustrating?
Well, overall we have a steeper learning curve than sort of the mainline MMO these days. We are more complex than WoW. Because, right out the door, we hit you with, okay, you can go crafting, you can go exploring, you can go do PvP, you can go do all this stuff right at the beginning of the game if you want to. Mm-hmm. So we've created at times sort of the problem of the paralysis of choice. If you have too many options, you don't know what you want to do. And also our skill system, our advancement system is a classless one. So you basically get a bunch of points, you can buy whatever skills you want. But if you don't know what everything does, it's again a paralysis of choice of, okay, I don't know what any of these do. What am I going to do? What if I spend my points wrong? So that's really where I think our feeling of challenge to some extent lies. Like the actual combat and stuff like that, not that difficult. But at the same time, there are other aspects of game structure that are challenging within it. So yeah, depending on who you talk to, it's either too challenging or not challenging enough. We were basically kind of shooting for in between World of Warcraft and Eve in our overall sort of difficulty learning curve sort of thing, because Eve is really hard to learn how to play, but WoW is really easy. So basically kind of do something in between to say, okay, there is a lot of depth, so you are constantly learning stuff, but at the same time, it's not quite as difficult.
Right. Let's step back out of the game itself and the pixels and the servers and even the mechanics of the FPS and everything and talk about the core game story. Mm-hmm. For the folks not up to speed on the world of Fallen Earth, what's life like for humans near the Grand Canyon in 2156, and how did humanity get there?
It's pretty crappy. Basically, the storyline for the game is about 50 years in our future. A virus shows up called the Shiva virus that wipes out 99% of life on Earth. and that which survives has its DNA mutated in the process. Basically, everybody in the game is effectively, at this point, an immune carrier they have the disease and it has affected their DNA, but it's not going to kill them like it killed most people. So and this happened. The game is set 100 years after that happened. So you have 100 years of these people with this messed up DNA, breeding, and all the monsters, all the creatures in the wilderness have the disease too. So they're making all these weird mutations. So you have all kinds of strange creatures running around. And as I said, this virus killed off most of the world. There were some nuclear strikes as the world fell apart. So the world it's sort of a mixture of a biological nuclear apocalypse. And the Grand Canyon is one of the few places that survived survived without suffering as bad as other places. One of the main reasons for this is there in the background of the game, there is a company called Global Tech, which effectively bought the Grand Canyon, 20, 30 years from now, the idea being the government got so far in debt, it started selling off assets, and there's uranium and copper in the Grand Canyon. So this corporation bought it and effectively turned it into like a corporate fiefdom of, we control all of this, we own all the businesses, kind of like the old company mining towns of you get paid by the company that also owns the store, and so you never really get ahead. And when everything kind of went to pot, they reacted with more severity than a government would be, because they're like, yeah, we don't really respect our citizens, so screw them. We're just bolting everything down, saving the people we can. They also had the advantage of having access to Hoover Dam, which is a massive source of power that will continue to work for years after anyone stops paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really fascinating piece of engineering that it'll produce power for decades. With not that much maintenance. So the Grand Canyon basically survived as one of the last bastions of humanity, because it had power and more people and stuff like that, until the Hoover Dam basically turned into a military dictatorship as the armed forces who survived took over it. And in time, that kind of fell apart, as dictatorships do, as the people rose up and got sick of it. And the beginning of the game actually takes place as what was called the Chota Revolt tears apart the society of Hoover Dam, and your character is trying to escape that whole process while the society of the dam is coming down around you.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a little bit about how fans have taken the podcasts and the in-game radio to kind of where you couldn't really expect it to go or predict it to go. But what has surprised you with the fan reaction to the story? Have they taken things in an unexpected direction?
I actually have been very surprised at how much attention people pay to it, because most of the time when people play MMOs, they have this whole kind of methodology of, okay, I'm going to read my mission, I'm going to see where it is on my map, I'm going to go do it, I'm not going to read anything, I'm going to go to the X, do what I have to do with the waypoint, come back, I'm done. But we actually have had a lot of people actually read it and get a lot of the stuff put in, like there's a lot of humor in Fallen Earth and just the mission dialogue, and starting to get some of these deeper storylines that they can follow throughout the game pretty much from the start. So we have gotten actually a lot of comments on players, who have really started paying attention and seeing some of the storylines come together, because throughout a lot of the game we drop a lot of different hints. We're building the game as sort of like a very long-term story. I mean, some of our story lines will not come to a head until two sectors after what we've released currently. I mean, this is probably going to be like a year or two down the line before a lot of these storylines are going to really get fully developed. So at this point, there's a lot of seeds and there's a lot of starts, but there's not a lot of finishes in most of the storylines. There are some specific factions we deal with that kind of come and go and have their own encapsulated storyline. There's some specific villains who have their own storyline, but those all tie into the bigger storylines. So far, it's people seem to have gotten pretty engrossed in it. There are some factions people seem more interested in than others. For example, we have a faction called the Cult of the Dead, who are mutant vampires, effectively, and people just don't seem that into them, which, I like them because, hey, mutant vampires, that's cool. But the players, maybe it's, we just didn't present them with in the right format or whatever, but for some reason that faction doesn't seem to get as much love from the players. They seem to be more interested in the core factions or some of the bad guy groups like the Outsiders. So we are kind of looking at what people really get into and shaping our story from that. But so far, people seem to be digging it. It's, it really, the thing they seem to talk about most actually seems to be the humor in the storylines.
Yep. So you talked a little bit about the sectors coming out. What's next for the Fallen Earth story?
Well, basically, without giving too much away, as the players have gone through the game, they've met they've met different groups who seem to be working at disparate goals. For example, in the first sector of the game, there's a guy named Castagant, who's one of the big bad guys. He has this big prison that his raiders work out of, and there's a big storyline about going to go fight him, and it has lots of boss battles and stuff like that. And he's working on cloning technology. And in Sector 3, you run into this group called the Earthbound, who are making various diseases and crazy monsters and stuff like that. And and there's a lot of groups that the players have met like that, who seem to be disparate elements that going forward in the story, you find, okay, these groups are actually related to each other. They are all kind of working together for someone who the players actually kind of know effectively. It's a character that's been introduced to them.
Okay.
So, later down the line, there's the, okay, this is what's, there's sort of a, okay, here's what's really going on behind the scenes for this one group, for sort of like the main storyline. Here's who all the bad guys really are. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, each faction in the game has their own specific stories. Like in Sector 4, one of the things that comes up is that you get to go to the headquarters of a faction called the Judges, who are sort of religious fanatics, and you get to sort of decisively deal with them in a way that most people will not really expect how you kind of finish them off. And there are other bad guy factions who are actually going to become neutral or good guy factions over the course of the next few sectors. So as players learn that, okay, they're doing bad things, but here's the reason they're doing the bad things, we can kind of understand that, and maybe if we help them with that, they'll stop trying to kill us, stuff like that. And of course, we've got in the background, we've got the group called the Outsiders, which are sort of the group from beyond the Grand Canyon province who have way more advanced tech than they should and stuff like that. And so they're sort of like a constant background element in the game. So they get more developed and more involved as time goes by.